All right, welcome to the second video in the series of What Was the World Like in 1500? Now, in this one, we're going to look at the characteristics of major world religions. And that's so that after this, we can look at the religious geography of the world, and you'll have a sense of what those different religions were, so they're not just names on paper. So here's the objective. We will describe the major beliefs, sacred writings, traditions, and customs of the major world religions by taking on the perspective of a follower of another faith and reacting to challenging real life situations. You will use the beliefs, sacred writings, traditions, and customs to justify your choices. So, why study world religions in the first place? Like, isn't religion a personal thing? Shouldn't that just be sort of left in the personal realm? Um, Maybe that's how we look at religions a lot in the United States today, but religion is also a social thing. It helps drive communities. And religions have driven history through those communities and the decisions that they make and the beliefs that they hold and the things they decide to buy, even. Um, but perhaps more importantly, is religion used to form a more significant part of culture and daily life in the Western world. And to understand what it was to live in 1500, you need to have a good sense of the religious beliefs and the religious lives that people lived. So, when did these religions start? Let's just put it on a timeline here. So, Hinduism started, the first of any of them, in 1750 BCE. So, that's 1700 years, 750 years before zero of the Common Era, and we're talking about 1500 of the Common Era. So, it's this like huge stretch of time, just over 3,000 years, long time ago, before we're starting to talk about. Judaism, exactly 3,000 years before we start looking at 1500 CE. And then Buddhism starts just 2,000 years before when we are looking at. Christianity starts close to 1,500 years before we're talking about. And then Islam starts under 1,000 years. So Islam is this young, vibrant religion during this time period. And you got sort of the old heavyweights still dominant in other areas of the world. And we'll take a look at that next video. Let's talk about the characteristics first. So Judaism was monotheistic. Mono meaning one, and theistic meaning God, having one God. And the founder of Judaism was this man named Abraham. And we have record of him in the Torah, which is the holy text of the Jewish faith. And that holds the story of the Jews as a people, and also the religious stories of who God is and what he has done. And it is a very masculine character in the Jewish faith. So the core beliefs of Judaism are laid out in the Ten Commandments of moral and religious conduct. And these Ten Commandments, you can see them all right here. But the one I want to really highlight to help you remember about this monotheism thing is that Judaism was interesting compared to the other religions at the time because it had just one God who was just one clear character. So they said, "You shall have no other gods beside me." And that's a pretty big deal. Like if you ever run into Greek and Roman mythology, they have gods all over the place. They have a god of door hinges. They have a god that's just like has two faces and it's the beginning and end of the year, Janus. But the Jews had one god, which probably was kind of weird for some of the other people around them. But all these other laws are important features of how they viewed the world, what was good, what was bad, what was a good religious life, and what wasn't. So some of them are pretty straightforward, like don't murder, don't steal, do not lie. Some of them were specific to this religion, like this Sabbath day idea, which we still have today. We talk about there being a Sabbath or this day of rest is commonly talked about in the United States because we used to have laws in the US that made it illegal to run your business on Sunday. They're called the Blue Laws in Virginia. So the power of these ideas that came from Judaism, you can still see in the world today. Christianity, another monotheistic religion, was founded by Jesus of Nazareth in that he's the person considered the Messiah, the main religious focus of this religion. But actually, the church itself was started by the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. The text that they use is called the Bible, and that's a lot of the stuff from the Torah plus the thing called the New Testament, which is the story of the life of Jesus, and then also a collected bunch of letters and other revelations and other writings that helped start the early church. And their core beliefs are in life after death, that there's this, that you will live again after you have died. that Jesus is the son of this one God person who comes from Judaism. It's the same God that Judaism talks about. And the religious traditions that we see in Christianity today, just like the symbols up here, were set by early church councils, which is Christians, well after the death of Jesus of Nazareth, coming together to decide what counts as Christianity and what does not count as Christianity. So in Islam, this is another monotheistic religion, and it was founded by this man, the Prophet Muhammad. And their holy text is called the Quran, which is the holy word of God that came down through an angel into Muhammad, and then he spoke it, and it was eventually written down. And the core beliefs of Islam is that Quran is the word of God. So clearly that text is very specifically holy in Islam, which is true in Christianity and true in Judaism, but true in different ways in each of them, which is fascinating. But they also believe that Muhammad is the final prophet, so no one else will speak the direct word of God after him. But also that there are 5 core beliefs of what it means to be a Muslim. So Islam is the religion. If you are a Muslim, then you follow Islam. And in order to follow Islam, here are the 5 things you need to definitely do. So first, you need to declare that there is no God but God. Remember the first commandment in Judaism, that there is but one God? Well, here you can see that coming through in Islam. And that Muhammad is God's messenger, also incredibly important. That you pray 5 times a day. You'll see people down on carpets praying in the direction of Mecca, the holy city. And then you give money to the poor, a specific amount. And that's been true in Christianity as well. That was a big part of early Christianity. But also that you should fast and exhibit self-control during Ramadan, which you may, if you know a Muslim person, you know that they do not eat during that time period, which blows my mind. That is not self-control that I have. And that you should take a pilgrimage, which is a holy journey to Mecca at least once in your lifetime, if you are financially able to do so. Next, let's talk about how these religions fit together. We've talked about the 3 so far, the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But they fit together historically. So Israel was conquered by Rome, the massive empire of the ancient world in the European Mediterranean area. And they were allowed to keep their religion, but they had to be controlled by Rome. Right at the turn of the BCE to CE, Jesus of Nazareth, a Jewish man, proclaimed himself Messiah, and mostly by his followers proclaimed Messiah. Interesting. But the believers of Christianity started to break away from Judaism and form their own separate religion. And those 2 religions spread throughout the Roman Empire in conflict, and they also coexisted some, but they sort of built on each other's ideas, and that conflict became an interesting driver for Christianity, which spread throughout the Roman Empire and eventually was made the official religion of the Roman Empire. Then later, Muhammad draws on those Christian and Jewish ideas and conflicts and makes it into a foundation for a new religion that also draws on some traditional nomadic religions from that area. And these 3 religions have a common foundation in Judaism and evolve from 1500 onward with constant input from one another. So they're, through conversation and through conflict, changing. Hinduism, which was over in India, they believed in many forms of one God, which to the eyes of a monotheistic believer pretty much just looks like multiple gods. But it's always more complicated than it first appears when you're not familiar with it. So, what are their core beliefs? Well, they believed in karma, that your actions and your thoughts in your life have consequences in the future. And the particular consequence that we're going to talk about here is reincarnation. Re meaning again, and incarnation, as in put into a physical form, because like carnal means like body. So you've got in, put in, carnation, which is the body. So put in a new body, and you're being reborn. And you get reborn as different kinds of creatures based on your karma from the previous life. So what you do in this life affects what you will be in the next life. And that's different than the Christian belief in life after death. This is life after life. So they also have a caste system. So when you're reborn, if you were a terrible, terrible, terrible person, then you're reborn as a low creature on this scale of what is high and what is low in the animal kingdom. But up here are humans, and within humans, there's also divisions, and that's the caste system. And in India today, there's lots of conflict over the results of that caste system, where there's a lot of discrimination. And we'll talk more about that later. Buddhism is non-theistic, as in they don't have this one god or even many gods, although that's a little bit different in China and a little bit different in Japan. Buddhism is a really fascinating, complex religion. But the founder of Buddhism was Siddhartha Gautama, or Gautama. He was called the Buddha after he figured out the original beliefs of Buddhism. And after he began it and started to spread it himself, it was powerfully spread by a man named Asoka, who had a large empire in southeastern Asia. And his missionaries and their writings are pushed throughout that area, and it results in Buddhism becoming far more popular. Now, Buddhism's basic ideas are that the world, see the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path to Enlightenment, but that the world is full of suffering. And that's a recognition that life is hard. And in particular, they think that the suffering comes from the desire for unattainable things and your connection to the physical world. And that if you can transcend that, as in if you can trans as in through, and send as in like go above. So you can go through to get above this obsession with the material, the physical world, then you can achieve enlightenment, which is a detachment from the world around you. And you can see here that that's, the truth of suffering. And I told you that suffering comes from the attachment to the world, and that you can, cessation means the stopping. So how to stop suffering, and then the actual path that you would take to stop the suffering. And that's this Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path has a lot of different pieces to it, and I invite you to read through it on this slide, but I'm not going to read it out loud because that would take a long time. But we'll also get to talk about it a little bit in class, especially the Ask Me Anything section. I highly invite you to do that. So click through this next slide, and that'll be all for today.